Hey, welcome back. We're going to try this again. Uh, Joining you this week from Inside the Hedges, I am your host, Matthew Bartlett, director and managing editor of The Roost, with my co-host here, Taylor McHargue, former Rice football quarterback. And football is what we're hoping to see this weekend in one form or another. How you feeling, Taylor?
Man, I'm good. I think I'm right there with everybody else that you got to roll with the punches this year. And I feel for these kids that have these games postponed and canceled. But, you look at North Texas has had a month off. So both of these teams coming off of pretty long hiatuses, but glad that both of them are getting a chance to get back out there and play this weekend. At least it looks like to this point, we think they're going to play.
Yeah, and that was bizarre when I saw that. So the last time North Texas was on the football field, they were playing Middle Tennessee, and it was the week before Rice played Middle Tennessee. So two teams having the last same opponent their recent games. That's probably uncommon, but not unheard of. One team taking a 5-week break after that. This is 2020. This is what we're living in, right? I mean,
yeah, no doubt.
And we talked about, we kind of weighed the pros and cons of having the long layoff when Rice was starting the season. And we ultimately decided that, you'd rather be playing football more recently than not. So maybe that gives Rice the, I guess, the more experienced recent football team against the opponent this year. Do we think we'd see that?
In one way, you could certainly look at it that way. In another way, you could look at for North Texas, this amount of time is really keen to like bowl prep. Like you play 5 games and then you have this month break, and now you're trying to figure out, okay, you've had 5 games to go back and review the tape, figure out what you have, who are your playmakers, especially you look at what they've gone through in the quarterback position. So I think there's pluses to both sides, but having some games under their belt for both of these teams and then getting a little bit of a break to get healthy. I know Rice has needed that, and we'll touch on some of that in a minute. But I think both of these teams will have benefited from having a little bit of time off.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's strange because so you have 1-1 Rice and 2-3 North Texas, and then you have teams in the UTSA just played their 9th game. And it's bizarre. They were having doing media availability with some of the players earlier today, and Isaac Klarkowski, Rice starting center, former walk-on, he had his first start about this time last year in Middle Tennessee, and then the North Texas game. And so it was a year ago since he, started playing, real college football. And lo and behold, there's only a couple of games that have happened since. It's kind of crazy to think that Rice had played 9 games at this point a year ago. Yeah, it's probably never going to sink in.
No, it is. It's very bizarre. I mean, we're not going to see anything like this again. And you're thankful for any games that you can play. I mean, that's going to be the mantra for everybody, regardless of the conference. Play as many as you can and be thankful for the ones that you get an opportunity to actually complete.
Yeah, absolutely bizarre. And, Rice wins this weekend, and they're among, I guess it's by winning percentage at the end of the day, but they'll be among the leaders in the West as far as chasing that division title at winning 2/3 of their games, which, okay, a 2-1 Rice and a 5-4 UTSA tied atop the standings would be quite interesting. But hopefully we'll get to that when we get to that, and that means we're going to play a game this weekend against North Texas. And so I think we've gotten through most of our where's Rice at last week in our preview show after no game, but you did allude to it. So that was the one news item that we really need to hit before we get into North Texas, is that we have a new updated depth chart, and that includes several new names that weren't on it last week. So Rice is going to get back as official as a depth chart is. And if you talk to an SID or someone on the football team, they don't put too much stock in what's written on the piece of paper. But they're going to get back Andrew Byrd and Jason White, 2 corners. Going to get back Kirk Lockhart and Trayshawn Chamberlain, 2 safeties. And so you are starting to see a defense that, we thought we might see at the beginning of the season that has most of its pieces, which is pretty good.
It is. The biggest thing is they're going up against a team this weekend that you need your full secondary. I mean, you need everybody healthy because you're going to see, regardless of who's at quarterback, they're going to test you downfield. So good timing for them. And like I touched on, that's one of the benefits to having these couple weeks off, is it actually afforded you the opportunity to get some guys healthy.
Yeah, and you alluded to the North Texas offense. We can probably jump into that right now, and it's going to be interesting because maybe this is the scorned Houston Texans fan and me, but is this going to be a situation where we just tell all of those guys healthy in the secondary, you just stand around Jalen Darden and don't let him catch the football, and he still might?
That guy's unbelievable. I think it's 29 career touchdowns. He's got 10 on the year already in 5 games. And for the Rice fans, he's a playmaker. He's kind of like a Jarrett Dillard back in the day. I mean, just catches everything thrown his way, and it just feels like when you're in the red zone, even out of the red zone, give him a chance to go up and make a play, and he'll do it. So he's obviously the threat that you got to lock down the most. And then regardless of who you see, whether it's Bean or Ani at quarterback, like I said, they're going to get the ball downfield. I mean, that's their mantra. Obviously, Bean runs the ball a little better than Ani does. But I imagine we see both of them in this game unless Bean comes out and starts hot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I was pulling up the stats because when I was doing my game prep and putting a preview together, and I saw Darden had 10 touchdowns, I was just like, that seems like a lot. Like if you've played a full season, That's a lot. But if you played 5 games, and we looked up, he is leading the nation in touchdown receptions with 10 through 5 games. The only other person who's that close with a shorter stack of games is Terrace Marshall at LSU. He has 9 touchdowns in 5 games, that's pretty good company if you're getting put up, the elite recruits out of the SEC. But he is unreal, and it's interesting. It's kind of one of those things where exactly what North Texas is going to do. We talked about they do have other options, and with this scheme, they're going to try and spread it around and get the open guy. But Darden's averaging 9-10 catches a game, and the next guy up, Deontay Simpson, is averaging 3 a game. So we know where the ball is going to go. It's stopping it that is the real challenge, and it's going to help to have some guys on the back end that Rice played North Texas last year and did extremely well, especially in the first half. Basically shut the offense down with I guess it's a matter of opinion, but probably at least a more experienced quarterback last year with Mason Fine.
Yeah, North Texas, like you said, you know what you're going to get out of them. They spread it out. They do a decent job in the run game, but a lot of they make their presence felt throwing the ball down the field. Bean's actually their second leading rusher. For Rice on defense, this is a game where you got to keep everything in front of you and get after the quarterback early. And I think that's where, Ani got pulled a couple of weeks ago with 2 turnovers in that game, 2 picks in that game. But for Rice on defense, this is one that you do not want this to be a track meet. You do not. Rice on offense isn't built for it to be a track meet. You don't want this to turn into a shootout. And you go back to the Middle Tennessee game. I know we keep talking about that, but North Texas had over 15, or maybe it was right at 15 explosive plays for the game, which is an unbelievable amount. I mean, in last year, Rice had 13 explosive plays to close out the season in 3 games. North Texas had that in 3. So limit those explosive plays, keep everything in front of you, and make them turn the ball over, because North Texas has some turnover problems. Force them to turn the ball over and convert points on those.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. You mentioned Bean and Ani, however you say it. Ani. So 2 quarterbacks, and we talked about this last week a little bit when we did our Louisiana Tech preview that for the game that didn't happen. Well, hopefully we don't keep saying that. But they have a 2 quarterbacks, or at least they're using 2 quarterbacks at Louisiana Tech. But we talked about how those 2 guys have a pretty similar skill set. So it was kind of, almost a detriment completely to Louisiana Tech to kind of shuffle guys back and forth.
Right.
You mentioned you think we might see both guys this weekend. I know, at least from what I've heard, the buzz from North Texas and what Bloomgren is expecting, it's going to be Jason Bean out of the gate. So if Rice does get both guys, how do you think the Owls will fare in that scenario?
Yeah, here's what I would expect if I'm a North Texas fan. And for Rice on defense, go back to the Middle Tennessee game for Rice, and the game plan was to shut down Asher O'Hara's ability to run the ball and be effective on the move. And they did that, but Asher O'Hara was effective getting the ball downfield. Their passing game was better than what we had seen through the first part of the season for Middle Tennessee. For North Texas, they're going to open the game up with Bean, who does a few things well, but he's also a pretty mobile quarterback and runs the ball well. If they shut that down, that's where I would expect to see Ani come in and they test this young secondary. And I know you got some guys back, but first real experience that some of these guys are going to see on the season, I would expect early and often, regardless of who's in at quarterback, you're going to see them tested deep, because the win over Southern Miss, Rice did a really nice job of getting after the quarterback, kept everything in front of them, rallied and tackled well. I think the recipe, if you're an offensive coordinator and you look at the two games that have been played so far this season, I would say the secondary play against Middle Tennessee is where you could find a weakness if there is one. Now, again, there were some young guys playing, a couple freshmen playing in that secondary, but I would expect to see North Texas stretch the ball down the field regardless of who's at quarterback.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, especially with the quarterback changes. It's going to come down, and we've mentioned this in our each of our previous previews about, really, we've seen enough out of this Rice offense that it's about eliminating mistakes, and the defense is good enough that if they can create those turnovers, it's going to be huge. For setting them up for success. I think back to the last two, really, since Bloomgren's been here, North Texas games. If you go back to the one in Denton, that was a game that Rice was competing in to the end, and then a turnover. That was Wiley Green making one of his first starts, I believe, and that game kind of snowballed at the end, and it was a very close game up until the third quarter. And then last year, it comes down to the one big hit in the end zone, that turnover on downs, essentially a turnover. These are, I mean, we don't get to see, maybe much in the way of true rivalry games in Conference USA. And if there is one, it's probably with some of the Texas teams. But yeah, this has the potential, regardless of how it goes, if it's another close game, we could get some good old fashioned hate going, which would be pretty fun.
Yeah, North Texas and UTSA are the two that both have been improving programs. You go back to 2013, my senior season, we go up and play North Texas on Halloween night. And that was a back and forth game. It was a really physical game. That season, North Texas was pretty good. Ended up with I want to say 9 or 10 wins on the year. They were a good football team. And for North Texas and UTSA, I feel like you get a lot of emotion. You go back to, those are kids that they all played against each other and played with each other in high school, recruited together. And so there's no love lost when these teams get together. I would expect this to be, I think the line right now is Rice is favored by a point. I mean, it's basically a pick 'em. And I think it's going to be a close game. I would not expect either one of these teams to run away with it. And this sounds really cliche, but in matchups like that, it's the team that capitalizes on short fields, capitalizes on any turnovers, converts those opportunities. I think that's going to be the team that wins this game.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look back at some of the series history with especially the Conference USA teams, even the ones that Rice hasn't been in the same conference with for very long, but been playing for a while, Rice and North Texas all time, the series is tied at 5-5. So this has been a pretty, even matchup going back through. You basically, most of these matchups have come from 2010 on, so the last decade or so, and the series is actually tied 2-2 in Denton. So Rice wins this game, you would have a winning record on the road in a rivalry game, which, yep, if I'm starting out how I would like to build a program, winning rivalry games on the road, that would be a nice building block to kind of show progress. It's one thing to win them at home. You want to win them at home, but winning on the road is a little extra something special.
It is, and there's not a ton of opportunities to play this season, right? I mean, you've already had two for Rice out of a shortened schedule already. Had back-to-back get postponed. Might get a chance to get the UTSA one in. We'll see what happens with scheduling, but Louisiana Tech looks like that one's not going to be rescheduled. So, really, all of these games you got to take advantage, but this one especially, I think there's more on the line because there is a rivalry factor to it. I know it's a relatively new rivalry, but I think that's not unreasonable to make that claim.
So I did some looking ahead because last weekend I had to, I guess it was Friday, I did a double take with the flexible scheduling here. In the Pac-12. It was UCLA and Arizona State were notified on Friday. They both lost their opponents. They were notified on Friday that they were going to play each other on Sunday in a previously unscheduled game,
Yep.
which is like I was told it takes like
2020.
20 years. It takes 20 years to plan and schedule a football game. You can't do it in 48 hours.
Right. Yeah, I think you've proven that putting these schedules out there years in advance, I still think you'll see it, especially for the biggest matchups. When you think back to like an Alabama USC meeting at Jerry World, those things take a long time to plan out, and the negotiations on those contracts take a while. But you've also seen, hey, we can put together a schedule last minute if we need to. We can get teams in the same building if we've got to do it. So you hope that if something happens again, I would love to see more flexibility, sort of like what you see out of the NFL, where guys they don't have COVID. They just are part of the contact tracing, but you test them the next day. It comes back negative. Okay, they're back, able to play. Right now, contact tracing is taking out, full position groups, and then a game gets canceled and come to find out it was actually just one guy that had it or two guys that had it. You could have played the game. So would love to see it being improved. But again, this is new for everybody. And I think these administrations and ADs and everybody involved, they're doing the best they can. So I understand it.
Yeah, I applaud, Joe Carlgard, Chuck Poole, all the guys running all of those traps because it's something I don't want to do. But I did look ahead and I took a peek. So UAB and UTEP, that game has already been called off for this coming weekend because of COVID-19 issues with the Blazers. So UTEP is, as far as we know, healthy and free. Louisiana Tech, they were also free with an opponent cancellation. So Rice has already put together a game plan for Louisiana Tech. They haven't prepped for UTEP, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, if we get to Friday and we don't have a football game and Rice is okay, there are options. I asked Bloomgren this week if that was something that what he would think about a situation, and he was basically pretty emphatic that he'll do it if they get to play football, but it would not be his preferred, his process doesn't account for a 48-hour notice.
Right. No, these coaches and players, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a kid's game, right? I mean, there's a ton of prep that goes into this stuff, but you put the ball down and tell them to play, they're going to play. And you do, as much prep as you can, but especially in a year like this, let them figure out a way to get these kids on the field and play whatever games they can.
Yeah, we took a bit of a detour, but I do want to circle back because we talked a lot about all this is getting to my brain. We talked about the North Texas offense because when you think about North Texas, that's about 85-90% of what they're going to do. But they do, I guess they're not required to field the defense, but they will probably put 11 guys on that side of the field. We mentioned not turning this into a track meet, but what are we going to get from the North Texas defense? And is that going to offer more resistance than Rice has seen in their first couple of games against Southern Miss and Middle Tennessee, or have they kind of turned things around?
Yeah, it's a talented bunch. There's a handful of guys you turn on the tape and it feels like, okay, this is beyond Conference USA talent at a few key positions. The biggest challenge for North Texas when I turn on the tape is they got to figure out a way to get more turnovers. They're just not turning the ball over enough and getting their offense the ball back in shortened fields. And this week, you got to imagine they're not going to really capture very many, if you had to guess, because Rice traditionally just doesn't turn the ball over very much. I mean, a 2-turnover game for Rice is enormous, whether that's a fumble or an interception. Really, to this point in the season, punt return errors have been some of the turnover problems really to this point. But for Middle Tennessee or for North Texas, Middle Tennessee had a lot of dynamic looks where they had some pretty crazy blitz packages. North Texas doesn't do as much of that. They're athletic though. I mean, they fly around, hard to get behind them on defense. But the challenge for them is going to be, you got to figure out a way to make, you can convert a couple turnovers. That's where you get ahead of a team like Rice that wants to slow the game down a little bit. You get a couple turnovers, give your team a 2-score lead. That's the recipe for success for North Texas in this game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. One guy I'm particularly keeping an eye on is Dion Noville, nose tackle Texas kid out of Abilene, and he has the potential to be a difference maker. I don't think we've seen through the first two games that kind of physical presence on the interior of a defensive line. And so far, the Rice offensive line has looked pretty good. Back to back five running the same five guys out there is a positive start. But if North Texas is going to find some push, it's going to probably be, can anyone put Mike Collins off his game and force him to make adjustments? Because we've seen what happens when teams give him a clean pocket and let him improvise. It can be really dangerous.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to how do you, to this point in the season, and as you would imagine, based on the last couple of years, Rice has seen loaded boxes and defenses are daring them to beat them throwing the ball down the field. And right now, they just haven't. Defenses of the two games that have been played to this point in the season, Southern Miss it's really struggled with winning their one-on-one matchups, and you saw it especially with Trammell. If you're going to play Rice with super tight coverage, a bunch of guys in the box, then you got to win your one-on-ones, and you can't let them get behind you.
Yeah, and we would be completely fine with watching somebody get behind me. Obviously, we've seen Austin Trammell have a big game, but I'm optimistic. What we haven't seen so far from the Rice offense to kind of wrap things up is we've seen a bunch of 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 yard runs. We haven't really seen any of those breakaway home runs. Like I feel like every other game last year, it was Aston Walter, who just start off the game with a 70-yard toss and just take it to the house. We haven't seen that yet. It would be a big bolster on the cap of this running game to kind of get some of those big chunk plays, because we've seen him through the air. But if this offense is really functioning, how maybe Mike Bloomgren hopes it would, it's going to start with a little bit more on the ground. And the first rushing touchdown of the season for Rice on November 21st.
That's right. Yeah, and none of us would have expected that. But that's complimentary football, right? I mean, if teams, like we talked about, if teams answer to playing Rice offenses to shut down the run game, then you got to hit your big plays in the pass game. And they've done that to this point. So if you're humming at a high level and you're getting big plays on both sides of the ball, that's obviously an ideal scenario.
Yeah. So we will see. We will be here regardless of what happens this weekend, whether or not Rice plays, presumably North Texas or somebody else, or, hopefully not nobody. But we will have the chance. Are you going to make it up to North Texas this weekend? And then if not, when's the next time we're going to see you?
I will not be up there. I'll be tuned in, obviously, but then I'll have the call the following week after Thanksgiving for the UTEP game. But excited about this one. This should be an entertaining game to watch. These teams usually, like we talked about, it's a close game, and I expect this one to follow suit.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully with Rice. I had one more note that Chuck Poole had put together in the notes this week that I thought was interesting. If Rice can finish up this win, this will be their the last time. I'm going to get this right because I really like this stat. The last time Rice won more than 3 conference road games in a row was 2012, 2013, 5-game streak. So getting 3 wins on the road, especially in the middle of a pandemic, I would be pretty excited about that. So we'll close out there. Where can we follow you and track what you are doing online? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, always on Twitter at McHargue16, and then have a couple of these home games coming up as well. So excited about this stretch of games coming up for Rice.
Yeah, and go follow Taylor on Twitter. Tweet at him. Tell us what you like about the show. If you enjoy it, if you have questions, if there's a chance that we might not have games to recap, we would love to take those from you guys live on the show or beforehand and kind of work through some things. But so go give him a follow. You can follow me at the Roost website, all social media. Go ahead and give us a subscription on Patreon. We'll get you plugged in with positive injury news on who's coming back, insight on who some of these young guys are that Rice has been practicing, and there's been some fun things to pay attention to. So go ahead and check those out, patreon.com at the Roost. We are looking forward to seeing you again next week. So until then, Rice fight.